Lawyers of Reddit, what are cases are you sorry you won? Story 1. I wouldn't say I regret this so much as to this day, it amazes me. As a first-year associate, I was given a turbo pie case where my client received a flu shot and after that felt pain in the shoulder. He went to another doctor who performed an MRI and determined that he had a torn rotator cuff, which was undoubtedly unrelated. My job was to allege the flu shot caused the rotator cuff tear. Our ortho actually correlated the two, which is the more regrettable position, and the case spayed out, being the bottom line of the totem pole. I had no choice but to take the case, which a partner had handed down, but at the same time just overwhelmingly made me feel like the worst stereotyped attorney and just hated having to walk into court on it and feel my reputation being destroyed. Story 2. I got a spoiled brat of a teenager cleared of a shoplifting charge when he absolutely did it. His rich parents hired me to represent him. I did that to the best of my ability and we went to trial and won, but I can't say that I felt good about it. The kid needed to be taught some accountability for his actions, and his parents just wanted to buy their way out of any trouble that he got into. Story 3. Did a divorce where the husband, who I was representing, wanted to trade custody of his children for a set of bedroom furniture. The bedroom furniture wasn't even like a family heirloom. It was furniture that you could probably get at a Rooms to Go or something. Still makes me sick. That's why I got out of family law. Edit. I'd honestly like to thank all of you for your various points of view on this particular pain point in my career. For the record, yes, I did win that particular point, but no, it did not fill me with any joy. But those who said that it was probably for the best, maybe you're right. Thank goodness he fought for the furniture and not the kids, if that's the kind of dad he would be. Choosing objects over children. Story 4. The one I particularly hated happened at my first law job. This woman was a long-term client on my bus in the past 10 years or so. She had been caught driving under the influence 8 times, violated home incarceration countless times, then caught with controlled substances a few times, and stabbed 2 people on house arrest. My boss at the time was the master of getting people off for DUI, so she'd only been convicted of a DUI third and always managed to stay on home incarceration with whatever releases she desired. Tired, I always regretted her cases because that woman is truly a danger to the public. She's undoubtedly going to kill somebody someday, but I'll be damned if using the luckiest woman alive and getting away with do is not my case. Story 5. But a former associate of mine won a PPO motion, hearing a personal protective order where he represented the person who the order would have been put against, not the victim. The victim's request to put a PPO on his client was denied, and like 2 months later, the victim ended up getting put in the hospital by the client. He beat her at times, and that one still bothers him. Prosecuted a murder case. Story 6. 21-year-old kid starts dating an older guy's ex-girlfriend. The older guy, real roughneck, lose connections with a local biker gang, was going all over his small town, talking about he's going to kick this kid at times, as the older guy sends some new times S of the axe while he's getting drunk at a bar. So the kid says something smartass in response. The older guy comes to the kid's house to fight him. The kid shoots him once and the older guy dies. The jury didn't buy self-defense or castle doctrine. Convicted of voluntary manslaughter. 20 years. Burned up his appeals with no luck. I have a son about the kid's age. I could totally imagine him doing the exact same things if you were in a similar situation. Shit's gonna haunt me till I die. No doubt about it. Started thinking about other work the moment that verdict came back. Story 7. We shuttled the case for several $1 million for a girl whose father was killed, the mother who was divorced from. The father tried every way possible to get the money, but it was placed into a blocked account until the girl turned 18. The day she turned 18, her mom told her that they were going to transfer the money to a better account. Mom transferred it to her own account and fled the country without the daughter. Screwed her own kid over for money, essentially made her own kid an orphan. Money does horrible things to people. Story 8. I represented this construction worker in a divorce. The wife stayed at home with the kids and had no money throughout the entire divorce. Her attorney claimed that my client was hiding money. They had no evidence and the client vehemently denied it. We did a good settlement in the case, and I considered it done when the client came in a few weeks later to pick up this file. They thanked me for my work and said, and she never did find the money. I hid. He had a big laugh and walked away. What a D times K. There is a good chance he was making a joke of the non-existent cash. Of course, I don't know the specifics. Story 9. But not since. No regrets here. But we have a client, dad, full physical custody, whose ex recently proposed terminating her parental rights if our client would waive back child support so she could get her $500 tax refund. He's a great dad. The woman shouldn't even be considered as a mother. What's regrettable is that the kid has to grow up, eventually learning what their mom is like. I'm a mom of soon-to-be 3 boys. I wouldn't trade any of my children for $500 million. Much less 500. Hopefully those kids grow up in a loving home with a dad and plenty of nurturing female role models that act the way their biological mother should have. Story 10. I worked in criminal law during my first summer of law school. My first case was defending a large 6-foot to teenage gang member who stabbed a rival gang member. I was put in charge of the motion, drafting and research under a supervising attorney. I also had several conversations with this young man, but he was remarkably well-spoken, so I never felt like he was an actual assassin, even though he admittedly was one. I remember working really hard in the library for hours, looking for any helpful case law. It felt great at the moment to help your clients in any way possible and put up the best defense. Ultimately, they conditionally discharged him, which is family court, since he was a juvenile parlance for 1-year probation. I remember my emotion is immediately shifting from relief to guilt and fear. I questioned the entire practice area that would allow a killer to walk the streets because of good legal work, and I ultimately decided it wasn't for me. No judgment to any criminal attorneys, just not for me. Now, I'm a happy-ish real estate attorney, and by happy-ish, I mean and me now. It's a coincidence. You happen to know a guy who can help you with that. Story 11. No one will read this, but it's my favorite case of my relative who is a lawyer. When he was a young personal injury lawyer and had to take all the cases were assigned to him, he had a client who was drinking with his neighbors on someone's front porch. It was a spontaneous get-together, and he got quite drunk. Starts talking about his amazing new portable saw that he just bought. It brings it out to demonstrate propping up a board against the porch, stare in his thigh. He proceeds to cut his junk so badly that it was hanging on by a thread. So my relative has this guy in to talk, and he says that he wants to sue the entire world. The maker of the saw, the store that sold to the neighbor whose porch he was on. He unexpectedly dropped his pants right then and there to show the damage. He refused to accept any blame for it at the trial. My relative's pants zipper broke, and he had to borrow the judge's stapler to staple it. Kind of ironic, and I always thought that lawyers had boring jobs. Story 12. I used to represent veterans to get their service-connected disability benefits. I represent a homeless veteran who told me that he was in a certain war zone. Everything he said corroborated with a timeline and how events played out, and the story barely changed. So I took it at face value and argued for service connection for his PTSD with the earliest effective date possible due to a technicality and expedited hearing due to his homelessness status. Got him 6 figures and off the streets for a while. Then his full records finally came in 2 years after I requested them. He never served there. He never served overseas at all. Kind of burned out after that. Story 13. Got laid to the party, but this story still makes me sad and angry. Not me, but my ex-boss. Civil matters. The firm represented a large construction company here in my country. They built and sold 30 houses in Spanish, an unfrocked show naming, there's a lot of corruption going on here in Mexico. And in this case, the company paid off a large amount to not follow construction regulations and save some money. Turns out some years, I believe it was 2 years, after all the houses were sold, there was a massive water malfunction that led to flooding, and 85% of the houses collapsed or were uninhabitable. The construction company's at fault. The people obviously sued for the prices of their homes and the damages of the furniture, etc. But they could no longer because the legal figure they could use, wrongful construction, had already been prescribed past the time to legally make a claim. My ex-boss is a very gentle soul and a great guy. He always remembers that case as the worst one and says everyone to reject similar ones because the guilt is way too consuming. People lost their houses, their furniture, their electronics, and in most had mortgages or similar debt in order to pay for them. Breaks my heart. Story 14. I'm a public defender for civil commitment So I defend folks with serious mental illnesses being ordered into treatment. One of my clients was placed in a locked nursing home. She was there for a couple of years. She was in her 50s. She told me that she would rather die than spend the rest of her life sitting in a hospital bed, listening to people moan and yell. She couldn't even go outside. It was a terrible place. Her boyfriend wanted her home. He managed his physical disability and felt that he could help her keep track of her RX and appointments. We took it back to court and won, got her off of court, ordered treatment, and released. She was so happy she went home Thursday. I got a call the next Monday that she passed over the weekend. I never really found out if it was an accidental OD, on purpose, or something else. I think about her. If I didn't win, she would be alive, but she would be miserable. Story 15. Former mostly divorce attorney. It was a divorce case that was 99% settled, except for the case of a large amount of cash in a safe. My client was mostly unreasonable with the entire case, not wanting to give his wife anything, and we finally went to trial on that one issue at the last second. My client swore he didn't have the money. His wife swore she put it back in the safe. I had to cross-examine my client's wife's elderly parents and discredit their testimony. You can probably imagine how that went. The judge ended up ruling at a case of lost money. My client later that day came in and paid his entire bill in wads of cash, many thousands of dollars. I stopped practicing law and switched careers 2 months later. Story 16. A few years ago, I represented an individual in a misdemeanor assault case. He had some chemical use issues that were pretty evident during the events, but I managed to get through the case without much of a penalty, and maybe he had to take a short alcohol education course. About 6 months later, he was raging through traffic at about 100 miles an hour while very drunk, and he obliterated somebody. I always felt that could have been avoided if he had been asked to complete some more serious treatment on my case. He's in prison now. Please don't ask for specifics. Had a case where a guy shot and killed a security guard that slapped him across the face for selling drugs near a store. I knew the guy that had done it. It was close to midnight. The crime scene had pole lighting, and the shooter wore a hoodie. Only eyewitness that showed up for the trial had told the police at the time of the crime that the suspect was black. The defendant wasn't Caucasian, but wasn't black either. That, in my opinion, was the argument that won the jury over. The defendant was found not guilty. He thanks me. Meanwhile, in tears, his mother and grandmother bring me cake and a thank you note afterwards. Less than a year later, I'm watching the news and they're reporting a crime where a crew held up 3 families hostage while robbing their apartments. They beat up the janitor very badly. They tied the families up and locked them in one of the apartment's bathrooms for a brief second. It looks like one of the robbers looks right into the elevator camera before spray painting a close-up on the guy's face. I think you know where this is going and whose face I was looking at. Story 17. I hope the guy successfully sued his ex-fiancée for the engagement ring after the relationship ended due to third-party interference on his part. It was wild and wildly depressing. I assume he cheated. You assume correctly.